Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Monday, March 21st, 2021. On today's episode, we're going to have a spoiler-filled discussion about Zack Snyder's Justice League. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining you on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
So, the moment we have all been waiting for is here, guys. The Snyder Cut has been released. We have all seen it, and if you're listening to this podcast, you have seen it too, because there's no reason for you to be listening to this podcast if you haven't seen it, because it's going to be full on spoilers. So we're really not going to dance around anything. So if you have not seen the movie, you should probably turn off this podcast now and go spend the next 4 hours of your life watching it, and then come back here so you can hear us talk about it. So, but before that, I guess let's do some brief reactions. I guess we've already heard from you guys, right?
Yeah,
and surprisingly, both of you guys seemed very positive on this.
I wouldn't say very positive. I'm more positive than I expected to be. I think this is a film that's worth seeing, which is a lot more than I expected to say when I went into it.
Yeah, I think that, Chris and I talked about the big word being interesting, and that was more than I thought it was going to be.
It's a fascinating experiment. That's how I see the film.
What did you think about it, Peter?
I thought, with all these months leading up to this, I was the one person being Snyder's director's cuts, the extended cuts on the DVDs and Blu-rays are generally better than the theatrical releases. And I was, it seemed like you guys had been beaten down, because I know you guys are in the news grind, and the comments from some of these Snyder fans, some of them are very positive, awesome people, and others of them are very toxic. So I assume that you guys had been beaten down and kind of over it. It didn't even seem like you guys were excited to see this. So I was expecting, and I generally, I think, give more room for populist movie entertainment than I think you guys do. So I was expecting to be the cheerleader when it came to this day, where I was going to be the one that liked it the most. And having had hearing your brief reactions, I think I like this the least out of us, which is kind of shocking.
Wow.
Well, yeah, how the tables have turned. I will agree with you, Chris. I do think that this is interesting and is worth watching once. Although, I've talked to people that have already watched it 5-6 times at this point.
Oh my God, are you serious?
All right,
yeah,
that's a bit much. I take it back. Everyone is nuts.
I do think that this is probably a better movie, but who wants to sit down for a 4-hour movie? I don't know. I think I maybe enjoyed the other one more.
I think
ways.
I said this on another episode, and Ben kind of disagreed with me, but I kind of think there is a better version of this that's maybe 3 hours. I think the problem with this is really like an assembly cut, in that it has literally everything in it. There's stuff in here, there's it feels like a 5-minute sequence where Alfred and Wonder Woman are making tea, and that sort of stuff does not need to be in the movie. It's amusing to have Alfred, be like, oh, Miss Prince, you're making tea wrong. But I don't need that in the movie. Stuff like that could easily have been cut to trim this down to 3 hours maybe.
Yeah, I do like what he was going for with it. I think, Chris, you said it was almost like a Lord of the Rings style epic that Zack Snyder was trying to do, and and he has those epic helicopter crane wide shots of people walking on mountains and all the stuff that you expect in those kind of movies, and I do appreciate that.
I mean, even the story, it's it's a group of people who are at odds coming together to stop this ancient evil, and you even have the mother boxes are the stand-in for the ring. It's really it's following the Lord of the Rings format very closely.
I really admire all that a lot. I just don't know. It was just so self-serious all the time. And also, you use the word interesting. And I think, to me, I had a hard time becoming invested in the story on a like when you're watching a movie and you start to forget about the special effects and the score and, oh my god, that was a cool shot, and like you become invested in these characters and stuff. I don't feel like I ever got to that point with this movie, because the whole time I was thinking like, oh, is this a reshoot? Is this oh, we're seeing uh Aquaman listening to someone talking, and we're not seeing the person talking. Like, is that ADR that Zack Snyder went back and added in to, flesh out the story? Like, I was thinking about the mechanics of how this thing was created the entire time. And oh no, did that bother you guys? Or
So I think part of that is because of just the unique nature of the presentation, or the sheer existence of this movie, right? Like, of course, as people who care about this stuff, we are going to have those kinds of thoughts going through our head. But I think you're really getting at a larger problem with, I would argue, all of the Zack Snyder DC movies, which is just like his take on these characters is it's very difficult to describe, but it seems it's not designed for you to be able to fall into the rhythm that way. It's more, he's much more of a visual stylist. People have been saying this about him since 300 came out, but like the guy is like almost more of a painter than a filmmaker in terms of like crafting images. And there's so many moments in this movie where Aquaman saves a guy in a boat, and like there's just slow-mo shots of Jason Momoa's hair like flipping and the water going crazy, or like Batman posing on top of a gargoyle, or like some sort of statue or something.
It's a movie designed to look cool, and now we're getting to the nitty-gritty and the negatives, but again, I like this, but I honestly don't think Zack Snyder understands any of these characters. I think he just thinks like, how can I make these characters look really fucking cool? And he doesn't actually put much more thought into it beyond that.
Yeah, I think that's why it because I had the same problem, Peter. Like I did not find myself engaged with the story, and it's because I didn't really care about the characters. And like, this movie sort of jumps all over the world, but you never really get a sense of the world or the people in it, or even, I mean, this movie spends so much more time than the theatrical cut digging into character backstories and stuff, but it's still so like ostensibly you should feel more about these characters, and I would argue that you do, especially about like characters like Cyborg. Like I felt more a little bit more attached to this iteration of that character than I did the theatrical one, just because you get so much more of that story penciled in and sort of shaded in from the sides. But even with all of that, I still was not emotionally attached to anything that any of the characters was ever really doing. And I think that's sort of the failure of Snyder's vision here, is that he's so focused on, like Chris said, just making shit look awesome, that you sort of, I don't know, it's like a sacrifice that I think some people who, grew up loving these characters and just wanting to see them exist in live action form, that's part of the reason, I think, why this Snyder Cut movement was like so fervent, was because, this was the thing. Like the theatrical Justice League sort of blew it a little bit. And these people, the idea of seeing these characters in the flesh means so much to so many people. But I would argue that, this Snyder's take just sort of does these characters a disservice by like the dark and grittiness of it all, and like the lack of emotional engagement. I think if more time was spent on characterization, I think we would be complaining a lot less about all the other stuff, because at least you could have something to latch onto. But sorry for talking so long.
I think that's the problem with this as a whole, from the screenplay up, is that this was not like Avengers, where every character had their own origin movie. You had a Justice League where you're introducing Aquaman, Cyborg, and Flash, right? Like they didn't have movies before this came out.
Right.
So like you got to cram, introductions for all of them into this already, like he's trying to do this epic Lord of the Rings style story. I don't know. I just feel like the approach of this thing, I think, was failed from the start.
Yeah, it's a tough strategy, especially when you've seen that it can be done the other way so successfully. I think if this was more successful, I think you could make the case that like this is just another way to pull off a similar kind of thing, to launch a cinematic universe, to build one out. But this movie, like I said, it's real tough to care about these characters the way that they're depicted here. But
yeah.
Before we get into some characters, I wanted to ask you guys about what your thoughts on some of the way this was presented. So it was presented in 4:3, which is the same aspect ratio we used to watch on TVs before we had high definition.
And it's also like it's called like Academy ratio. It's like old timey. The Lighthouse is presented in this ratio, and First Cow has this aspect ratio too, and also now the Snyder Cut has it.
Yeah,
for some reason.
Now, this is also close to the ratio of what if you shot a film in IMAX, like an actual, the film IMAX, not the digital IMAX. Like that's what it's close to that ratio. But I don't think he shot most of the film in IMAX. They're definitely not film cameras. So what is the point? Because I felt like some of these scenes, I'm watching these epic scenes, and it almost felt like some of the scenes, like the sides were being cut off. Almost like I was watching, how we used to watch movies back in the day. I'm not sure if you guys are old enough.
The pan and scan era, it's called, yeah.
Where it used to get chopped off on the sides. Like, I don't know. That's what I felt in some of the battles and some of the stuff. I was like, I was missing stuff.
Yeah, I honestly do not think this aspect ratio adds anything to the movie. And I remain genuinely befuddled as to why he was so insistent on it. I honestly do not buy this is what it would look like on IMAX thing, because that screen is so much bigger than what you're getting at home. A part of me honestly thinks he did it because he knows people are going to watch this on like phones and iPads. And I also feel like he doesn't want to come out and say that. That's honest, that's like my conspiracy theory take on this, that he knows people are going to watch this on phones, and he doesn't want to be like, I made this for phones, because that's like against the law. Directors can't say that. And that's honestly my theory.
Ben, do you have any thoughts on aspect ratio?
It just sort of feels like an affectation. I didn't really get anything out of it. And who knows, maybe, when he does take this movie around the country and shows it in IMAX, then maybe people who view it in that format will have, a more profound experience with it. I will not be one of those people. I'm not going to be watching this movie again.
Yeah, when he takes it around the country to these IMAX theaters, he's going to be presenting it with all the millions of colors capable of the, 2 4K projectors that IMAX... No, he's going to be presenting in black and white.
I really think this just ties into his obsession with being like, doesn't this look cool? And I really, and I know people are going to call me out for this and say I'm not giving Zack Snyder enough credit. Maybe that's true, but I really... part of me is like really thinks he doesn't put much thought into this beyond that. Like, how can I make this look cool?
I don't know. I will say this though. A lot of people like to call directors like Zack Snyder or Michael Bay hacks. And I really don't feel that is the case. You can tell that there is a lot of effort going into these films, maybe not in the right buckets of effort, but I do think that both those filmmakers are artists in their own rights, but maybe they're more, concerning themselves with the visuals than the story.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to talk about in the presentation is that this was presented as a 4-hour movie, but then there's these chapters, and while I was watching this, and at one point I think I was like, oh, okay, now it's time for like the final battle or whatever, and I clicked on my Apple remote to see how far I was in, and it was like halfway through the movie, and I was like, oh, we got 2 more hours. I almost wonder if I would have enjoyed this more. And by the way, I want to say that I did enjoy this. Like, I'm not the fact that I enjoyed this less than both of you guys doesn't mean that I hated this. I'm recommending this. I'm saying that people should go out and see this, and it's interesting. But I do wonder if I would have enjoyed this more if originally they were playing around with the idea of releasing this as a mini series in a bunch of different like 30-minute or 1-hour episodes. And I almost wonder if it would have played better for me as a miniseries.
I think it would, because I didn't watch it all in one sitting. I watched it over 2 days, and I actually liked that there was those chapter breaks there, because I was like, man, I need to, because I started watching it late at night, and it was like 1 a.m. and I was like, I need to fucking go to bed. And I was like, when can I stop this? And then it hit a chapter break, and I was like, well, there you go. There's a perfect place to stop. So I honestly appreciated the chapter breaks, because it does break up the overwhelming experience where it's just like, oh my God, this is so goddamn long. Like this, I really think those chapter breaks help.
I did the same thing, Chris. I watched it, the first 2 hours one night, and then the second 2 hours the other night. And I appreciated the break for the same reason that you did. I do think if they would have released it as, like, I think they were talking about doing it in 4 episode chunks or something, like 4 1 hour chunks or whatever the idea was originally, I think that would have been a mistake, because I think that would have been too much. Like, theoretically they would release one once a week, right? So then by the end, you're watching something a month after you started it, and like this thing is already it's already confusing enough as it is. So some of the plotting and stuff here, it's just still, even with these 4 hours, I'm like, what the hell is going on? Okay, all right. So the idea of I think they made the smart call to condense it into one 4 hour thing.
Yeah, you talked about the positives here. Giving some of these characters more room did help some of these characters, like Cyborg. Did you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, I just think, Ray Fisher the actor who plays Cyborg has made such a big deal about how not even the Joss Whedon allegations about the abuse on, during the reshoots and stuff, but even before that, just the way that his character sort of got the shaft in the theatrical cut in terms of like just being mostly cut out of the movie. And in addition to there being just so much of this version of the film that was not shot by Joss Whedon, like I was kind of gobsmacked at how much footage there was that Snyder himself was able to capture. Because I think he said he was not going to use a single shot that he didn't shoot himself, or he and his guys didn't shoot himself. The Cyborg stuff is where you can really see it, more than any other character. I think he's the one where like, oh yeah, I guess it makes sense that Ray Fisher, this being like his first big break, like he probably thought his life was going to change in a way that it has not changed, because he was going to be, the sort of like linchpin of this entire movie. And like, he has so much more to do in this cut. I still don't think that this is like a great performance. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's sort of a tough character to play, but it is like, in my mind, unquestionably better and more rich than what we saw in the theatrical cut.
I mean, yeah, I do like that the character has an arc here. I like that he's initially just like, I'm a monster, and then he's like realizes, oh, he can be a hero. Although there's a lot of like corny bullshit, like that part where he's like learning his powers and he's like inside his own mind, and it's like,
yeah,
his father, who's played by Joe Morton, is like, you can manipulate the stock market, and Zack Snyder represents that by having like a CGI bear and a CGI bull fighting, because those are like the animals for the market, the bear market and the bull market. And I was just like, wow, that is stupid. That's like so fucking stupid. But I really did appreciate that this character has an arc here. I liked those flashbacks where it's like shows him, and his mother, and I do feel like the movie was pushing for this relationship with his father that I really don't think is there.
Yeah.
Like, they keep making a big deal about like, oh, how he's estranged from his father because his father brought him back from the dead. But we only really get that just because of the way he's just acting, where he's just like a little awkward around his dad.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like they really should have, I probably shouldn't be saying this because it would make the movie even longer, but I wish they explored that just a little bit more.
No, I agree. And I think that one moment where Joe Morton's character like sacrifices himself, I was confused for many minutes after that. Like, what on earth does he think he's doing here? And the movie sort of like purposefully withholds information until, the gang gets back into the Batcave, I think it is. And Ben Affleck or somebody is like he's like, provided some superheating, so this allows us to track,
Like,
the signature or whatever.
Wasn't there a way for him to do that without murdering himself? Like, I feel like he could have just like put the box in that room and stepped out. Like, I really don't think he needed to vaporize himself to do that.
I honestly think it's just Zack Snyder did the same thing in Watchmen with the Dr. Manhattan character when he made that movie, and he just loves that visual, and he just wanted to do it again. That was the read that I had of that. But I think, regardless of like how confused I was in that moment, I think that's where you sort of see the emotion come over Ray Fisher's face. That was like the highlight of his performance to me, was like that realization, and he felt the most human to me in that moment. And I thought Joe Morton like sold it, pretty well also. But
Joe
yeah,
Morton's great. He does so much with like nothing.
Yeah.
He has nothing to do here, but he's such a good actor that he really sells how like sad that character is. I want to know more about him. Give me the Joe Morton cut. That's what I want.
The Star Labs cut.
Yeah.
I do agree that this is probably one of the better additions to this is fleshing out Cyborg's story, but at the same time, I feel like the story is very formulaic, and we've seen this before in many different forms. Like it, as you said, there's moments that are just like so on the nose and cheesy and bad, and Ray Fisher isn't that great of an actor.
He gets to say "fuck the world" though, because this is a very serious movie
for adults, Chris.
Yes. Fuck the world.
Yeah.
Whoa, Cyborg, dial it down a notch.
Another thing, and it's like, I don't know, I feel like this is intrinsic with what Zack Snyder was going with the design of the character. I just don't like the way the character looks. It just looks like bad CG to me.
Yeah, there are a lot of shots, especially of Cyborg, where it's like, that does not look convincing at all. Like, I haven't watched Doom Patrol, but I've seen images. I'm sorry, I don't know the actor's name, but it's literally just an actor wearing like a faceplate, and that looks so much better than just like a cartoon man running around. But that's what I think, at least.
Peter, what did you think about Steppenwolf? Like, he's another character who's fleshed out a little bit more, given a little bit more of a backstory in this version. What did you think about that character, both in the theatrical cut and in this version?
I gotta admit, I have not seen the theatrical version since it came out in theaters, or actually before it came out in theaters. I saw an early screening of it. So when we get to the comparisons and stuff, I'm not sure I'm gonna be the one to go to. Because I only remember in vague terms, and I know, Ben, you revisited it right before you watched this.
And you did too, Chris, right?
I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched like clips because I don't have time. No, ain't nobody got time for that.
Okay. The way Joss Whedon wanted you to watch it.
That's just random clips on YouTube.
Yeah. But I don't know. I don't. Is there much more here? Like, it just feels like he's just trying to like serve up this thing for Darkseid, which seemed like where Snyder wanted the sequel, the Justice League 2, to go. He wanted, he wanted basically, the guys to lose at the end of this movie, and then the sequel was going to be Darkseid. Yeah.
So Steppenwolf, first of all, Steppenwolf, I think, is just a terrible character in both versions. I never once believe he's like real. Like, say what you will about Josh Brolin's Thanos in the MCU, like the fact that they actually had Josh Brolin on set a lot, doing the motion capture, really helps make that character feel real. And he sort of looks like Josh Brolin. So it's like, you kind of believe Thanos is a real character. There's never a single moment where I'm looking at Steppenwolf and I'm like, that's a real character. Like, he just looks like he's got like this shitty armor. It looks like a blender. And the character's voice has been like, Syrian Hines is the actor, and he's a great actor, but they put so much like modulation over his voice where it just sounds like he's like eating every time he's talking. And the key difference here is, and I do like this, even though I don't like the character, is they make Steppenwolf a lot more pathetic in this version. Like, he's basically just like this friggin' loser who's trying to impress his boss, and he's constantly doing like Zoom calls with the planet. What is it? It's called like Apocalypse or something like that, or whatever the planet is called. And he's just like, I'm trying really hard. Like, it's not really explained, but for whatever reason, like he's in Dutch with Darkseid. Darkseid is not happy with Steppenwolf, so Steppenwolf needs to conquer Earth, and that'll get him back in Darkseid's good graces. So he's constantly like calling home and being like, "I'm trying really hard. Give me a break." So I did kind of like that they made him like this really lame loser guy, but I still just don't care about the character.
But what do you think of the villain's motivations? Because I feel like that's not really even that clear. Or
obviously, he wants those mother boxes. No, I don't know. I don't. The villain's plans here are so weirdly.
I didn't even understand it. So maybe one of you two could explain it to me. So Earth is a place where the anti-life
equation.
What does that mean? Like,
I have no idea.
I think it means that the Omega symbol has been carved into the ground for some reason.
That's another thing that's like really unclear, because at one point Steppenwolf is like, "Oh my God, this is the planet you tried to conquer before." It's like, did they not remember that?
Yeah, I don't really get that.
Did Darkseid forget to mention that, like, he had already been?
It's like Darkseid. My understanding was Darkseid has spent, maybe ever since he lost that battle against the Atlanteans and the Amazonians and all these people, like scouring the galaxy looking for this anti-life equation. And like, did he never
forgot?
Yeah. Did he never know that the anti-life equation was on Earth, and he fought a battle there once and was like, well, I obviously would have seen it if it was there, so I don't have to worry about Earth anymore. And then Steppenwolf realizes, oh shit, this is the planet, and that's the big thing that's going to put him back in Darkseid's good graces.
They showed Darkseid like get injured. Maybe that injury like ruined his memory or something. It's very like that whole part where they're just like, oh, this is the planet. I was like, how did you not realize that? Like,
this is the thing, is like parts of this movie are so dumb and it's just people punching each other, and then other parts are like, is there something here that I'm just too stupid to understand? Like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's fully explained in the movie.
It seems like
really not.
Darkseid, if that's the thing he's been looking for however millennia, who knows, however long, and somebody found it, you would think he would use one of those boom tubes to just like teleport there immediately and just start fucking shit up in the biggest way possible. But he is like, ready the armada, we're gonna do this the old-fashioned way or something. And it's like so clearly just like, we can't afford to have a huge battle in this movie, we'll save it for the next movie. Like, it's just so transparent.
Why okay, so they show this big mythical battle from who knows how long
olden
ago.
days,
right?
It's like prehistory times. Yeah.
But honestly, I like that. That was awesome. I like how they kind of made it so that the Atlanteans and the Amazonians, like, we were all together as one, and it like split up the planet. And
there's like a Green Lantern alien there flying around and stuff.
Yeah, no, all that was really cool. But then after they win that battle, why didn't they destroy the mother boxes?
Yeah,
because they wouldn't have a movie, Peter. They got to keep it going.
They maybe they couldn't destroy them. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I assume it's like the ring, Lord of the Rings. You can't just destroy it. Although I do love that, like, they had this whole montage where everyone's like hiding their mother boxes, and like humans just bury it. Like,
yeah, I wrote that as my note. I was like, the Atlanteans like built this entire like fortress for it.
Yeah, and the Amazons have like a pyramid, and it just cuts to the humans. They're just like, just throw it in the ground.
And then it ends up in Cyborg's closet for some reason. Like, I don't know. And I guess he reburies it in his mother's grave at one point.
But then he immediately like digs it up. It's like, what the fuck is going on? I don't understand.
And then the same thing happens in the theatrical cut where, like, once Superman comes into the equation, way late in this movie, by the way, even still, I
think it's like 2 hours and a half, or if not 2 hours and 45 minutes into the movie or something.
That was one of the big complaints that I had in the theatrical cut. And I was sure that this movie was going to give us at least like half Superman, half whatever. And then when they like revive Superman, they have the one thing that Steppenwolf and Darkseid care about, which is the mother box. And they use this thing to resurrect Superman, and it lands in a parking lot near the ship, and nobody gives a shit about it. Like,
it lands on like a car hood.
Yeah, and they all just like, all eyes on Superman, nobody cares. And then friggin' Steppenwolf just like, blips in, grabs the thing, and blips away, and nobody reacts. Like, nobody's like, oh shit, I can't believe we didn't. You weren't you supposed to be keeping an eye on it? I thought you were doing it. None of that. It was just like, well, yep, there goes the one thing that he needed to be able to create the unity or whatever the hell.
You have to synchronize the mother boxes
Yes.
to get the unity.
By the way, who created these mother boxes? Darkseid did, right?
I guess. I think so.
So why
Maybe
couldn't
not.
he just build more mother boxes?
Yeah, that's a good question. They may have said that.
He's gonna sit around on his throne. He doesn't have time to build more mother boxes.
By the way, I feel like this isn't nitpicks. Like I know sometimes when you go to the Marvel movies, like
this is like the main plot of
Yeah.
the movie. This isn't a nitpick. This is like literally why anyone is doing anything
Yeah, that's
in this
the thing.
movie.
Mhm.
I guess let's talk about Darkseid and how stupid he looks.
Oh God, who cares? I know fans love Darkseid, but he seems so boring in this movie. He's just sitting around, and I know everyone was like, "Oh shit, Granny Goodness is in this movie," and she's like in one shot. She doesn't say anything. Like again, this is all Zack Snyder being like, you know what's cool? This stuff. That's just
Wait, who?
there. Granny Goodness is. It kind of looks like Elizabeth Warren is like hanging out with Darkseid on his planet, and she's a character from the comics, but they don't even like say her name, probably because that would be really ridiculous if Darkseid was like Granny Goodness.
Fetch me my armada.
Prepare my ship.
I do feel like a lot of the stuff in this movie isn't the Snyder cut. This isn't the movie that Zack Snyder would have. This isn't even. I was gonna say this isn't the movie that Warner Brothers would have released if he had finished it. This isn't even the ultimate home video cut that would have been released. This is the cut where Snyder has had how many years since Justice League?
I think it came out
2017.
So 3, 4.
We can't do math here on the Slash Film.
But like he's had all these years. I'm guaranteeing if you were like, I know you guys don't like Rise of Skywalker. I'm guaranteeing if you went to J.J. Abrams and you're like, JJ, you have $70 million to create a director's cut of Rise of Skywalker. Go. Now that he has all the feedback of everybody, right? And like he could make a cut that I think you guys would enjoy because it's hindsight, right? Like you have all the feedback of what everybody didn't like in Justice League, and then on top of that, you could just be like, oh, I'll just throw in a Martian Manhunter here, and I'll just throw in the Granny Goodness or whatever. Like, yeah, I don't know. Martian Manhunter. Let's talk about Martian Manhunter.
I mean, this is one of those moments that just it worked for me less than almost anything else in this. Just like that moment where Martha Kent goes in and has that conversation with Lois Lane, and then like leaves the apartment and then shapeshifts into Martian Manhunter, and he's
so
like,
bad.
he's like, get back to the world needs you, Lois, or whatever.
To your office job, Lois Lane. Like, it sucks so bad because that scene is good as is, because Amy Adams, Diane Lane, those are great actresses. Put them in a scene together, let them have an emotional moment. It works. And then Zack Snyder immediately like trips over himself to be like, it was actually Martian Manhunter. It's like, how do you not realize that robs that scene of any real emotional impact? Because like later Lois Lane is going to be like, thanks for stopping by my apartment.
Right.
And Martha Kent's going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
But also it doesn't give any like new layer to that scene. That scene like was already emotional it was a scene that was written, right? Like this Martian Manhunter is a reshoot, right?
I don't even know. I can't.
I think it is. I think that's one of the things that he he wanted to do at the time, but didn't have time to do or whatever. But yeah, just like shot whatever that actor's name is,
Harry Lennox.
Oh, Harry Lennox, yes.
And he's a good actor, but this does not do him any favors.
Yeah, and then at the very end of the movie, like the last thing, after the nightmare scene, which I'm sure we'll talk about here shortly, when Ben Affleck is in his lake house and then Martian Manhunter just like floats down and he's like, I'm the Martian Manhunter. I'm like, you're just like, wait a second. Okay, so...
Well, actually, no, Ben, that's not what he does. Superman asks him who he is, and he's like, I go by many names, and he doesn't tell him. Then at the end of the scene, before he flies away, he's like, I'm Martian Manhunter.
He's like, there are some who call me Martian Man. It's like, okay.
It's a real Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan moment where you're just like, is this supposed to mean anything to me as a normal viewer? And I understand.
Or even
that,
like Batman. Batman is just like, okay,
Right.
even all right. Thanks for stopping by.
But I feel like I already knew this because, like, when he turned into Martian Manhunter when he was leaving, I don't really follow DC, but I knew instantly who it was, and like I reacted, and Kitra was like, "Who is that?" I was like, "Martian Manhunter." She was like, "Who is that?"
Right. Yeah, and this movie like introduces him but doesn't really do anything with the character, and it's clearly supposed to be a setup for more movies, but I don't know, man.
It's like what is Martian Manhunter up to this entire time? He's just like waiting around. Like they could really use your help, Martian Manhunter.
And I did not go back and rewatch Man of Steel, but I think the implication is that he's supposed to be that general that Harry Lennox, played in that movie, and like I don't know what that means for the larger, DCEU that guy actually was the Martian Manhunter the whole time. It's like, is he supposed to be some sort of like course correcting figure who is just, trying to, what is his end game? Like, is he operating from some sort of higher plane of awareness where like he can see multiple time streams and knows that certain characters need to be in certain positions at certain times? I don't know. I just have a lot of questions. Yeah. I don't know.
There was a story that broke today. I'm not sure if one of you two wrote it up. It was about Zack Snyder saying how he almost quit Justice League because he wanted Green Lantern to be in the end of this movie.
Right.
So originally the scene as written, it actually would make a lot more sense. If you think about the scene, because like, he was out in outer space and he comes down and it's like the first contact, like he's like, let's team up as not just the world, but as the galaxy. Like that makes more sense. Martian Manhunter makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, and at least audiences would have had familiarity with Green Lantern because he got his own movie in 2011. So like that would be, people wouldn't be quite as confused as I'm guessing a lot of regular people might be when they tune into this. Although how many quote unquote regular people are actually going to watch 4 hours of Justice League, I have no idea, but... Yeah.
Okay. What else we got here? We got.
And by the way, I want to. I don't know. I feel like I don't want to like be the buzzkill because I do feel like there's a lot of people that really did like this movie. I'm looking at my Twitter, and even critics seem to have, like, you guys.
I mean, I gave a positive review, and I think we will get to.
Okay, we'll get to some.
This show, this episode is going to be longer than the actual Snyder cut at this point, but we're going to get to.
So I want to apologize to anybody out there that loves this movie and is listening to this and is just like really fuming and angry.
Here's
like,
what I can say.
We didn't dislike the movie. It's just like we're going through it.
There's no movie without flaws. I mean, there are very few perfect movies, and if you think this is a perfect movie, I don't know what to tell you. So we're I don't think we're being overly mean here. Like I think we're pointing out things that really don't work that well in this movie, but there are things that do work. And
okay, before we get to that, let's get to Superman.
Yes, because that doesn't work at all.
We'll say this: I do think the world without Superman is established better in this movie than I remember it being established in Justice League.
Here's one of the things I want to say, and I know this is like controversial, but I do think, and I'm not defending Joss Whedon as a person because by now we've all learned that he's just kind of a piece of shit. But I do think he understands Superman better than Zack Snyder, which is saying a lot since Zack Snyder made an entire Superman movie. But the stuff with Superman works, I think, a little bit better in the Whedon cut. Like, I know we'll all laugh at that, the CGI removing Henry Cavill's mustache, and that does look bad, but I think Whedon understands how to portray Superman a bit better. Like, I really, as distracting as the CGI face is, I really like that opening scene of the Whedon cut where it's kids like with a cell phone interviewing Superman, and Superman's doing his best to like answer their questions in a nice, honest way. And I feel like that one scene understands Superman better than anything that's going on in the Snyder cut, because it portrays him as this, approachable guy, and here he's like, I mean, he's a murderous alien who, puts on a cool black suit, which never explained. There's never a moment where they're like, why is Superman's suit black? He just puts it on because it looks cool.
I have a question for you guys. Is that a reshoot? I don't want to say reshoot because
I think what happened was it was originally a black suit and then they color corrected it for the theatrical cut to make it blue.
Oh, really?
I think it's the other way around. I think I don't know. I feel like I read or had to write something about how he wanted it to be black, but the studio wanted it to be, the normal colors. So they dressed him in the normal colored suit. And then for this cut, they just color corrected it to be black and white or whatever.
Because this is what I'm thinking when I'm watching this movie is like he walks into a ship and then like behind him, all these like these clothing dresser drawers come out showing all the suits, and he goes up to the one with the black suit and like the light from the thing hits him and then we see it's the black suit. It just hit me while I'm watching this. I'm like, those dressers were just that's a quote unquote reshoot, a re-render. Like the dressers coming out in the background, it doesn't seem like those were there initially. Oh no, it doesn't make sense that he's wearing the black suit. I mean,
no, it's literally another example of him being like, this looks cool. And I get it. That's partially from the comics, because Superman in the comics, he dies and he comes back and he has like a mullet. But comics don't need to explain that stuff. It's different when it's on screen.
But also, and I forget who said this. I think I liked it on Twitter, so I'm stealing this from someone who I can't even credit right now. But they said, just because something's in the comics doesn't make it better. Doesn't make it.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean? Yeah. So.
Yeah, Chris, I think you're right about the Whedon cut of Superman, because like even in the big climactic action scene that in the theatrical cut, it has like this Russian family that sort of feels like it's out of place and a little out of nowhere. Right. But at least you get to see scenes of Superman like saving people and
that's the other thing. Like the Whedon cut, it takes time to show us normal people. Like the Snyder cut doesn't feel like a single real human being exists in this world.
Yeah.
But again, like I think Snyder thinks Superman is cool, and I don't think Superman should be cool. Like I like that the Whedon cut makes him kind of like a nerd, and that I think is really how Superman should be. He's the all-American hero. He's like this nerdy guy who just happens to be a really strong alien, and that's not how Zack Snyder sees him.
But even when he's fighting the bad guy in this movie, he like has this like really angry, mean, like he's like in battle, and like Superman should be smiling. Do you know what I mean?
The way that it seemed to me that in the Snyder cut, Superman is like somehow more powerful, like more of a
God.
like a Deus Ex Machina, like almost literally, where like he is the final guy that comes in and just like starts wrecking shit during that big final battle. Like they almost had to take him off the board for so long, because otherwise, I mean, I guess it's a problem that we talked about with Captain Marvel. We've talked about with other Superman stories. Like he's so overpowered that what are you going to do? Like you have to take him off the board, or else there is no story, or the story would be over in 5 minutes or whatever. So it just sort of I felt that a little bit more in the Snyder version. I think like the way that he comes back and just immediately starts beating the shit out of Steppenwolf in a way that like these other superheroes, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, could not. They were struggling really, really hard. And I get that Superman is like the most powerful, hero in the DC universe or whatever, but it just felt, well, I mean, let's just talk about that climactic action scene. Chris, what did you think about that part of the movie? Because it's way different than the theatrical version.
I liked most of it. I really like the idea of the way it plays out is, they're trying to stop what is it called? The synchronicity, the singularity. I don't know what it's called. They're trying to stop the mother box from doing a thing, and they like fail because the Flash gets like shot with a laser and he falls down, and part of the plan involves the Flash run around and charging up electricity. But the Flash is so powerful and so fast, and I know this is a ripoff of the Richard Donner Superman, but whatever. He runs fast enough to make time reverse itself, and as long as you don't focus too much on the logic and the logistics of that, I really think that's neat. And I really like the way they showed that, where there's literally like a shot of like Superman's like skeleton or something, and then like the flesh comes back on his body. And I was like, oh, this is fucking cool. So I don't know if I think it's a little too long. Like it goes on forever, this big final fight. And there's stuff that like I really do not like, even though he's evil. I don't like the idea of Wonder Woman cutting off heads. Yeah. And Wonder Woman is another character I feel like Zack Snyder does not understand, because
talk about Wonder Woman.
Her introduction to this movie is her literally blowing a man up. And, you could argue and be like, well, that guy was a terrorist and he was evil, but I feel like Wonder Woman should be above that. Wonder Woman should not be straight up murdering dudes, and
in front of children.
Yeah. And then like, it's that whole sequence is so fucking weird, because she blows up a guy and then a little girl is like, can I be like you when I grow up? And it's like, what the fuck is going, like, does she want to grow up and blow people up? Is that what's happening here?
The weird thing is, I see this discussion online. I see people on my Twitter feed being retweeted, and I've even seen articles from big movie websites being like, yeah, Wonder Woman's been restored to her natural like Amazonian warrior, like this is a good thing.
No,
I'm like, what?
It's not. I don't like Wonder Woman 1984. That movie was a mess. But the first Wonder Woman movie, Patty Jenkins really understands that character in ways that Zack Snyder clearly does not. And I feel like I've gotten us way off topic, and I'm sorry about this. Take it back, Ben.
No, I mean, I think you're right. I guess the devil's advocate, to step into a position that Peter always takes, is that like, there's enough room for multiple interpretations of a character. I just don't like these interpretations of these characters, and I think a lot of people do, and that's just like a straight up difference of opinion. There's not really, we've sort of reached an impasse when it comes to that. There's not really much you can, either side can do to like talk the other side into understanding why this doesn't work or this does work. I would love to hear like legitimate arguments for why this version of Wonder Woman is better than the Wonder Woman that we saw in the 2017 movie, just to understand like where people are coming from with that mentality, because I don't understand it, because I also think that that iteration of the character is makes a lot more sense to me as a dramatically, narratively, whatever. But yeah, it's
the terrorists must be killed. Ben is what but I've been a Zack Snyder defender for many years. I actually really like Man of Steel, and I know at the end of that movie that spoilers for Man of Steel, there's this moment where he ends up killing and snapping the neck of the villain in that movie, and a lot of people had a problem with that. And I yes, that's not the Superman from the comics. I get that, and I go with it. I think like this is a good, like a different take, and this is also the first time that he's like kind of stepped up and like been part, in like tried to do something on a big scale before in that movie. And I was like, oh, this is a learning situation. Like this is his first like battle, his first real big battle, and like of course he's gonna make mistakes along the way, and like that's how you become a person. But my defense of that clearly is wrong, because clearly that's not what it was. Clearly, right. Zack Snyder wants Superman to snap necks, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk about Flash.
Let's get positive here, because I really think, and I don't know if I'm in the minority here, but I really think Ezra Miller is like the only actor in this movie, in any version of the movie, the Whedon cut or this cut, who's like enjoying himself and like having fun with the role. Like I really like Ben Affleck. I think Ben Affleck in theory is a good Batman, but he seems really like stiff and wooden in this movie. Whereas Ezra Miller is having fun. He understands that the Flash is kind of a silly character, and he gets to have fun with it. And he gets to, play up the fact that the character is like constantly on the move. And he's introduced in this movie with this incredibly silly scene that I honestly, it's my favorite scene in the entire movie. And it's the part where he's applying for a job at like a pet store, and a car accident happens outside the window. Like there's a truck, and the character is supposed to be Iris West, played by Kirsten Clemens, although they never even say her name in the movie. So
does she have a line of dialogue in that
she's
scene?
Like, there's a part where she's like mumbling to herself while she's starting her car, but she doesn't really like have anything to say. And
was she supposed to have a bigger role?
if there, that's what like it was reported, but an earlier report said that like even before Snyder stepped away from this, he ended up cutting her scenes for time. So I really don't think she had that big of a role to begin with, but she is going to be in the standalone Flash movie, so she will finally have more to do. But in this scene, she's about to get killed in the car accident, and the Flash rushes out to save her. And like all action scenes in Zack Snyder movies, it's done in very, very slow motion, maybe slower than normal because it's playing up the fact that the Flash moves quicker than the speed of light, so he needs to be slowed down so we can see him. And it plays out with this song called "Song to the Siren" playing. It's a cover of that song, and that song is like this beautiful, poetic song about love and loss, and it doesn't fit with what we're seeing at all, but it's so earnest. It's so earnestly done where this beautiful song is playing and the Flash is very, very slowly saving this woman. And he takes time because like a hot dog cart gets hit. So he takes time to reach out and grab a CGI hot dog so he can give it to the dogs back in the pet shop. And it's so fucking silly, but I loved it so much because it feels like the only scene in this movie where Zack Snyder is being like, you know what? This is an inherently silly movie. This is a movie about superheroes trying to gather up mother boxes. And it's okay to have a scene where if things are just incredibly goofy and unrealistic and just charming in a way that no other scene in this movie is. Like, I'd argue like every other action scene in this movie is played to be like, look at how fucking cool this is. And I don't get that from this scene. I get like, look at how kind of silly this is. This man is grabbing CGI hot dogs. And that's why I love this scene so much, because I feel like if the movie had more scenes like this, not, I don't mean literally.
Well, I think
like
that's what the
Flash
WB
grabbing hot dogs, but
I was gonna say that I think that's what the WB executives thought, and they hired Joss Whedon, and
that
they
backfired.
added some more silliness, and I actually like the silliness, and it actually, to me, I think I like Flash less in this movie.
He's a lot less funny in this one, yeah.
Oh, he's a lot less fun. Okay, I didn't even know because I haven't compared them.
The Whedon cut gives him a lot more joke. Like there's a joke about, and I really like this because I love Pet Sematary, but there's a joke about Pet Sematary in the Whedon cut that is not in this one, and I really missed that joke in here because I love Pet Sematary.
Yeah, there's some. We were going to talk later about like things that work better in each version. We've sort of been talking about it along the way, so I don't know how hard we need to hit that point when we get to it later. But I think the Flash in this version works a lot better because they cut some of that humor back. It was like way too much in the Whedon cut. Like there's this part where he makes this. He's talking to Batman and he's like, I'm socially awkward. Like, I don't know how to talk to people. Like, what is brunch? There's this whole thing with brunch. It's like you stand in line for an hour to like have lunch, basically. Like, what's the deal with brunch? And like,
it's like he's working on his Tight 15 for the Chuckle Hut.
Yeah, it's so prolonged and painful. And they cut all of that out in this one. And he just has like, quote unquote normal quips, like what I think a normal amount of quips should be for this character instead of just being a quip machine. And I know that like Ezra Miller has like off-screen, issues that we're aware of that. But I think he works better in this cut of the movie than in the theatrical version.
See, I don't know. For me, and this is my theory, so let me know what you guys think. But like for me, I didn't think the Flash worked as well, not because the jokes were cut down. I'm fine with, the brunch joke going into the trash. But because like it was bookended in every turn by such like seriousness and nihilistic and dark and like it just like felt so out of place in this movie for me. Like whenever there was a joke where like before it kind of like eased into them a little bit more.
I could see that.
I feel like I think for reasons I don't understand, Ezra Miller is the only one in this movie who seems like he understands comedic timing. So I think that helps. Like there's a part where they're digging up Superman's grave and like him and Cyborg are having a conversation and they're talking about how hot Wonder Woman is or whatever. And I don't think the lines are particularly funny, but Ezra Miller knows how to sell them. And Ray Fisher is just sort of just like talking, and it's like none of these people understand there's like a certain rhythm to comedic dialogue, and I feel like that hurts things a lot.
You know, here's an aside. I'm not sure what this says about anything, but I visited the set of Justice League when Zack Snyder was directing it, and he showed us the scene with Flash. It was the scene where Batman is in his secret Flash lair, and he walks in, and it plays basically the same as what it plays in this movie, aside from the new weird score that they put underneath that I feel like undercuts some of the comedy. And in that scene, Flash says that the person on the video is just a young Jewish boy. And I remember on set visit, after the set visit, one of the journalists that was on the set visit asked, we were able to send in questions to Zach to get further clarification. And one of the journalists sent in a question being like, so are you changing Flash's, his ethnicity and his origins to him being a Jewish person? And the reply we got back was, oh, this is an early cut of this. That was a joke that Ezra made on set. It's not going to be in the final film because he's obviously not Jewish, whatever. So the fact that it was like in this cut and in the cut that he showed us in the film, and like he didn't even know if the Flash is Jew. I don't know. It just seems like it's such a not thinking about things. Not that it matters.
Are you implying Zack Snyder doesn't know what he's doing, Peter?
I'm not even implying it matters if Flash is Jewish or not, but it's just the fact that like he didn't even think about it when he showed us that first cut. I don't know. It just seems weird to me. But...
Well, speaking of Zack Snyder not knowing what he's doing, let's talk about the Knightmare Sequence, guys. we gotta wrap this thing up. We gotta talk about this. Yeah, so, what the fuck was going on? This
is hands down. Like, I don't, and anytime I say like I make a ultimatum like this, you could couch it with like arguably, but I think without question this is the worst scene in the entire movie, and it hurts the movie. Like, if this weren't in the film, I would probably have like bumped my review score up at least like a number. It's a catastrophically bad scene.
Can you explain to me what is going on here? What is this universe?
You want to do it, Ben? You want to take it?
Because I honestly, I'm not playing this up. This is not Devil's Advocate. This isn't Peter acting dumb. I don't understand what the Nightmare verse is.
Yeah, so the Nightmare verse is what happens when Darkseid does eventually come to Earth, and he gets the anti-life equation and he uses it on Superman. And from what I've been able to glean through Wikipedia posts, not because the movie actually explains this, the anti-life equation allows Darkseid to essentially control the minds of whoever is under his spell, basically. So he does it to...
Also, at some point, Lois Lane gets killed in this equation,
right?
Too.
So he does it to Superman, who is bereaved because of the loss of Lois, who he basically entrusted Lois Lane into Batman's protection. Batman, in a scene that we have not seen depicted yet, and now likely will never see, somehow let Lois die. Because, as you might remember from Batman versus Superman, Flash time travels backwards and says Lois Lane is the key to this whole thing, right? And so that's where we saw that original Nightmare scene with Batman walking around in the duster and that whole get up. So what we're seeing is Bruce Wayne having these visions of what the world is going to be like when Darkseid is taking over, and so basically, this movie...
So his dream, his nightmare is him seeing the future?
Yeah, it's like a premonition, basically.
Yeah. So this movie, essentially ends. It comes to a conclusion that seems pretty okay. Wow, Zack Snyder's actually maybe going to stick the landing here. And then
I'd argue there's a great final shot, and it's that shot where Superman runs into an alley, pulls open his shirt, and you see the symbol. That's a classic, iconic Superman image, and that is literally what the last shot should be.
Yeah, and then it smash cuts to this post-apocalyptic future with no context or anything for what's going on. And we'd seen previously, I think when Cyborg was interacting with the Kryptonian ship, he got a little blip of a little vision of part of this future as well, where you see, Wonder Woman is dead, Aquaman is dead, a lot of the big name players are dead. Basically, it just comes down to the people who show up in this Nightmare sequence, which are Ezra Miller's Flash looking really, really weird.
He's got fake facial hair on and stuff.
Yeah, at first I didn't even think that was him, but Chris assured me that it was, and evidently he was shooting Fantastic Beasts 3 at the time of production. So he was directed by Snyder over Zoom or something against a green screen in London or wherever the hell. And then you've got Joe Manganiello, who is Deathstroke, who's got a different haircut this time. The scene between Deathstroke and Lex Luthor on the boat was slightly different. They didn't tease the Injustice League like they did in the theatrical cut of this movie. And in fact, they actually set up what was going to be the Deathstroke solo film, where he goes after Batman, because Lex Luthor gives him the identity of Bruce Wayne. So the implication is, right after that, there's going to be a Deathstroke movie where Deathstroke and Batman are clashing. But then we fast forward all the way into this nightmare scenario where those two are actually on the same team because of survival reasons. And then you've got Jared Leto's Joker who's there. You've got Ray Fisher's Cyborg, and then it's Mira, right? Amber Heard.
Amber Heard doing a terrible accent. Oh my God.
So all of them, and then of course Bruce Wayne's Batman. So they're all just on the edge of this city or whatever, where Darkseid, I guess, is holding court, and then Superman shows up.
Mad Max, basically.
Yeah, Superman shows up right at the very end, and that's when Bruce Wayne wakes up, and you realize this whole thing was actually just a dream, part of that premonition thing again. And then we get into the Martian Manhunter scene at the very end. But
first we get 45 minutes of Batman and the Joker talking to each other,
and Batman, dropping the F-bomb to him.
Yeah,
of course.
Batman says, "I'm gonna fucking kill you." And look, Jared Leto annoys me, but I do think Jared Leto can be a good actor in certain segments. I think he's delivered good performances in the past. His Joker is atrocious. If you thought he was bad in Suicide Squad, you ain't seen nothing yet, because holy shit, his role here, and it's worth noting that this is one of the only new things that was shot, and this was another thing that I think was shot via Zoom or whatever.
Wait, explain this to me, Chris. Okay, so you're given a lot of money to do reshoots. I mean, a lot of the money went into post-production and visual effects and stuff like that, so it didn't go into these reshoots. But you were giving some money to do reshoots, and you don't use that money to flesh out the story and the characters of this movie, but you do it in an epilogue to set up a sequel that probably will never happen.
I gotta respect Zack Snyder for that, because that is a baller move. He could have done something logical, and he was like, no, I'm gonna stubbornly set up a sequel that will never happen.
I think the entire reason was because Ben Affleck's Batman and Jared Leto's Joker never interacted. I think he said that was the entire reason. He sort of reverse created this nightmare sequence just so that interaction could happen.
I don't buy that. I think what Snyder was doing here is he was hoping that this whole Snyder cut would take off in such a big way that HBO Max would want
to restore the Snyderverse, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but I don't think they're ever going to restore the Snyderverse, but I think he painted himself into a small corner where he would be able to play with characters that aren't in the big scheme. You know what I mean? He doesn't have Aquaman there. He doesn't have Wonder Woman. He has the figures that no one else wanted to play with. And, because they've already replaced Batman, so, and they're not going to use this Joker. And hopefully, maybe if enough people wanted it, maybe he could make this Nightmareverse movie.
That's a good theory. And I hope they never fucking make that, because I do not want to see that. And it's
it's the most miserable part of the whole movie.
It robs the film of its momentum, because like I said, that final shot of Superman, that ends the movie on a hopeful note. And I know Zack Snyder likes things dark and gritty, but it's okay to have that movie. It's okay to end Justice League on an upbeat note. You don't need to set up this fucking post-apocalyptic landscape where the Joker is talking about giving Batman a reach around, and and they're just bickering at each other for. I should really go back and time it, but I swear to God, it really feels like this conversation goes on for at least 20 minutes, where it's just Batman and the Joker just shit talking each other, and no one fucking needs that. It's so it doesn't feel like Batman or the Joker, like as you know the characters. It just feels like two miserable guys arguing with each other, and they just happen to be dressed like Batman and the Joker. And it's like, it's so annoying because like I said, it doesn't sound like it after the show, but I do like a lot of this movie. And if this scene weren't in there, I would like it a lot more. Or even just like make this a literal post-credit scene. Like if this had to, like if they had ended the movie, ran a bunch of credits, and then shown this, I could maybe accept it because I could just be like, well, I have this thing where post-credit scenes don't really count in my mind. If they counted, they wouldn't be post-credit scenes. They'd be part of the actual movie. So if this had been a legitimate post-credit scene, I could be like, all right, that was stupid, but I don't need to, accept
it as seriously.
Right. But by putting it in the movie and as the actual ending of the movie, it's like, what are you doing? How, I know this is Zack Snyder's vision. I know this is his baby, but I refuse to believe there wasn't at least one person who was like, this is bad. We don't need this in the movie. It's so strange.
I'm really wondering how much oversight there was from Warner Brothers or HBO Max in how he spent this money for reshoots, because it really doesn't seem like he handed over a script and someone approved this.
Yeah, I think they were willing to just like let him do whatever he wanted, because I think I don't know. I guess let's get into that question. Like, Peter, do you want to see more? Like, if HBO Max, I mean, I think we just wrote an article that is probably published by now at slashfilm.com, where like I think Ann Sarnoff, who's one of the heads of Warner Media, was like, yeah, this is basically the end of the line for Zack Snyder and DC. Like, we released the Snyder Cut and that's about it. So that's sort of like, she said that in so many words.
I mean, she like literally said it's not, she doesn't even like dance around it. She literally says, this is the end of Zack Snyder's trilogy, the trilogy being Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and now this, and that's it. There's no more.
Yeah,
so,
but it's the start of the Knightmare trilogy, is what the fans are.
Yeah, like, do you what do you think, Peter? Like, what do you think the likelihood is that, like you said, you don't have to pay Jason Momoa, you don't have to pay Gal Gadot, because those characters are dead. So if he were to do something that just picked up in this Nightmare verse, and considering also DC is, with the Flash movie, they're like leaning heavily into the multiverse thing, and like there could be a way for you to explain how this storyline continues. Do you think that Snyder is going to, like, or not that Snyder would be interested, because it's clear that he's interested in continuing this story.
If you ask him in interviews, he's like, no, I just put that in there.
I know he says that, but it seems pretty obvious that he wants to do it. But do you think that Warner is actually going to give him, let's call it whatever, $30 to $50 million for like an HBO Max TV show, like a 6-episode run or something, exploring this, where it's not like a huge money commitment for them in the same way that, a $300 million budget would be? What do you think?
Well, I think you need more money than that. I don't think you can make it for that little. But like, how much does a Game of Thrones episode cost?
I think it was at like 15 million or something at one point.
I think you could do a 6-episode series, $15 million an episode. But like, is this as big as Game of Thrones? No. I guess the bottom line answer is that any company will do whatever as long as it benefits them financially. And if they see that enough fans are subscribing to HBO Max to warrant them spending that money, then yes. But I don't know. Also, Anne is making you said in their Slack channel, Anne's making this, in an interview on Sunday. She's seen the numbers. She knows how many people have subscribed, and she's making those claims that seem very finite. I don't know. I didn't think they were going to make the Snyder Cut. I didn't think we would get the release of the Snyder Cut. And if you go back in history, I tweeted, I think like a week before it was announced, I was like, I was wrong. Like I had heard from sources. Like, so it is possible. Anything's possible. I know Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker, who's gotten big companies to release his films that don't agree with necessarily what he's saying, has said time and time again that, like, a big corporation will cut off their own tail if they think they can make money off it. Like, there's no there's nothing to it. So I think the question is, can it make $90 million. I think it needs to make at least 90 or $100 million for them to do like a 6-episode series. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess, like you said, there's always the possibility. I just think, I wonder how much fans care about, if he were to pick up that story, that is a very small percentage of what happens in this movie. And the character dynamics and the team dynamics are totally different. So I don't know if it's fair to say that like everybody who is excited about the Snyder Cut would also be excited to continue watching stuff set specifically in that Nightmare verse. But I'm curious what our listeners think about this too. Like if you're a fan of this movie, or if you really love that thing, like would you be interested in watching a 6-episode thing? Like send us an email and let us know, because I want to like sort of take the temperature of the fandom on this, because I don't really think people are talking about that.
Please be nice in the email. We're legitimately asking. You don't have to tell us like you're an asshole for not wanting.
The other interesting thing is that whole flashback. You mentioned not flashback. Flash going back in time and talking to Bruce Wayne and telling him that Lois is the key. I know at some point that was a big part of the Flashpoint movie that they were going to make, the Flash movie, which I'm sure if anybody has read the comic book Flashpoint, they could probably piece together how that would fit into that whole equation. So do you think they're going to ever use that in the Flash movie or whatever they're doing with Flashpoint, or do you think like that's now written off in the Snyder Cut? They never have to explain that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that they're gonna.
So here's the real answer. So continuity wise, the Snyder Cut doesn't actually count with what's going on in the Warner Brothers DC movies. The theatrical version of Justice League does, and the theatrical version actually comes up with a workaround to explain the Lois Lane thing, because I don't know if you guys remember this, Ben, because he recently rewatched it, but in the theatrical cut, when Superman comes back from the life and he's fucking crazy and he wants to kill people, Batman's like, look, I have Lois Lane right here. And her being there is what calms him down. And that sort of happens in the Snyder Cut, but her being there is like a fucking coincidence. She just happens to be at the spot where, and so Joss Whedon, for, again, not defending him, he's got his problems, but he actually came up with, I would say, an acceptable answer in that Lois Lane is the key, quote unquote, to stopping Superman from going crazy and killing everyone. So in theory, they actually have already answered this question, so they don't need to actually answer it.
Right. Yeah. The theory. I see. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. That makes sense.
Can we talk about how big Batman's tank is?
His tank that it just shows up at the end. Yeah. But he also has that it's, I guess it's called like the Nightcrawler, and it looks like a spider. That was a cool thing. That's fine. What do we like about this movie? Because I feel like we did spend a lot of time talking about the negatives, and there are a lot, but
yeah,
besides that Flash thing, I love a lot of like little weird details about this. I really like, even though I don't care about Darkseid, I really like that ancient battle, because it literally looks like something from Lord of the Rings, where there's like gods shooting lightning out of their hands, and I love stuff like that. And even though it's like it has nothing to do with anything, I really like little moments like where Aquaman just walks into the sea and all these Icelandic women start singing. Like, as weird as that is, I really like that it's there, because it goes a long way to making this world feel like lived in. Like, oh, there's these these Icelandic women who probably worship Aquaman as a god, and when he returns to the sea, they sing a sad song, because it's like, oh, our god is leaving us, and stuff like that. I really dig stuff like that, and that's the kind of stuff that you don't really have time for in a lot of modern day superhero movies. It's all everything's like rushing to get to somewhere else, and even though, again, I don't think this movie needs to be 4 hours long, I do appreciate that it is able to have those little weird moments like that, because those moments add up and they make the film stand apart from everything else out there. And I honestly think that's the biggest positive about this film, that it doesn't really feel like any other superhero movie right now. Even it doesn't even feel like, Batman v Superman. It feels like its own thing. It feels like this big, sprawling fantasy epic. And even though I think the Marvel movies are better, they don't feel like that to me. They feel very much like, formulaic superhero movies. So I really appreciate that this feels different. And that's really all I'm looking for these days, because there's so many superhero movies if you're going to make a new one, do something different with it. And I really appreciated that this film does that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that Iceland stuff too. I think that all of that, everything in that setting plays better in the Snyder cut than it does in the theatrical cut for me. The very beginning of the theatrical cut has the scene where Batman is on a roof and he is like, I think he's like tracking down a thug and using him as a bait to capture a parademon, and the parademon explodes into the wall and leaves 3 boxes behind in like blood or something, and Batman's like, this symbol, these 3 boxes, they keep showing up all across my detective work. I wonder what this is. And all of that is just such bullshit and so terrible. And this movie very wisely just cuts all of that out. And I was very thankful that I didn't have to watch that again. And in this,
do we know that that's a Joss Whedon thing?
Yeah, that is definitely a Joss Whedon.
I mean, not the obviously the boxes on the wall is, but like the scene that precedes that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because Joss Whedon, this is a thing that's not in the Snyder cut. Joss Whedon actually gives like the parademons, I don't want to call it an arc, but they have this thing where like they sense fear. Mm-hmm. And that's actually how Steppenwolf dies at the end, because he's suddenly afraid that Superman is there, and the parademons are like, "Oh, this guy's." Yeah. It's basically like the end of The Lion King, where the hyenas turn on Scar.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the downside though is that this movie opens basically with Bruce Wayne just like, traversing the Icelandic mountains and just going down into that village or whatever. So you're kind of left a little bit like, okay, how much time exactly has passed from Superman's death versus where we are now? And in the theatrical cut, I think it makes it clear that like at least 2 years has gone by. And in this movie, it's not that long. I think it's only a few months. And you see there's that one moment where you see Lois Lane's pregnancy test in her drawer. And that was like supposed to be a setup for like 2 movies down the road when Lois and Clark's kid was going to become the new Batman, which is a whole crazy thing that you can read about at slashfilm.com if you want to know about that. So I wasn't quite sure exactly what the deal is with the time there, but I wanted to call that out as a huge positive that they cut out that stupid parademon on the roof scene.
No, I think I admire the scope and the scale and what they're going with, the whole, making this almost a Lord of the Rings style superhero film, but I don't know. I think I admire this film more on the scale of like, oh, it's so interesting to see a different take on the same, footage from a different filmmaker, and what they were able to carve together with an unfinished. Zack Snyder was not finished with this movie, so he was able to somehow finish his vision with, using CG, doesn't seem like he reshot much. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I want to read a book. I want to read a book about this all the behind the scenes stuff and how everything that happened. I don't think we're going to get it. Not for, 10, 20 years.
To be clear, there is a book out about the Snyder cut, but
it's from the fan perspective.
Yeah. No offense to the author or anything like that. The book is fine for what it is, but that book is very much,
it's about the movement.
Yeah. It's more about how the fans made this happen. And that's a story worth telling. But what Peter is saying, and what I would love to, is like a really gossipy, nitty gritty behind the scenes book that literally lays out all the crazy shit that happened. Because whatever you think you know about this production, I guarantee you, listener, there's stuff you don't know that went on behind the scenes of this film.
Yeah,
that is actually a really good place to end. But I also just remembered that Willem Dafoe is in this movie, and I wanted to call that out as a positive too. I love seeing long-haired Willem Dafoe rise from the waters and talk in an air bubble with people.
And not to harp on the negative stuff too, but like that's a perfect example of why I'm glad they're moving on from Snyder's verse, because when you compare Snyder's take on Aquaman to James Wan's, it's so different, and in a bad way. Like Zack Snyder, he came up with this idea where it's like, I can't have characters just talking underwater. So every time characters are in Atlantis, they summon up these air bubbles to talk in. And James Wan is like, who fucking cares? Just let them talk underwater. And that works so much better than having to have everything stop so characters can jump inside a bubble to have a conversation. And I feel like that's the perfect example. Like, I'd rather have the James Wan version.
Yeah. And, it's been reported that Snyder left this project because he was mourning over the death of his daughter who had committed suicide. There is a moment in this film where Flash and Bruce Wayne drive off in the car and they go by this billboard. That's a billboard for the AFSP, and it says, "You are not alone." So I thought that was a good tribute, I guess.
Yeah, and at the very end, after everything ends, it says "For Autumn," and that was Zack Snyder's daughter, and that made me like really emotional just seeing that big on the screen. It's like, oh wow, that's like he fucking did this. I have some problems with Zack Snyder fans, some of them, not all of them, but he seems like a good guy, and I'm glad he got to do this. I'm glad it's like, I hope it, I hope it made him feel better to fucking get to do this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And the reason that, a lot of fans, I think, or maybe not fans, but a lot of critics or people sort of like poke fun at Zack Snyder for using the song Hallelujah a lot, but that was his daughter's favorite song. And that song appears in the credits of this movie as well. So that's another sort of like nice little touching thing. But yeah, I'm right there with you, Chris. I think that this is like, it's really a nice thing. We can completely separate the like whether or not a massive corporation should have given in to like a fan campaign on this scale. But, putting all of that aside, just the idea that like Snyder may have been able to use this to sort of like bring some sort of closure to his family or like this chapter of his life. I think, that's hopefully good for him on a personal level. And it's good for us in that we have this really weird, like totally unique piece of history to like look at and study and just examine and admire from all different corners. And like, we've never really had anything like this before. So I'm glad that this exists, even though there are many, many aspects of it that I was not a huge fan of. But I hope that this podcast episode didn't come off as just like only a list of complaints that we have, because I think there is a lot of like good to interesting stuff here. But I just think
I'm glad the Snyder Cut exists, and I feel like that is the biggest compliment I can pay it, because before I
didn't want it
before I was like, we don't need this. We do not need the Zack Snyder Cut, and I completely changed my tune there. And I'm glad this movie exists for all its flaws. I'm glad we got to see it.
Okay, so I guess the big question to leave off this episode is Zack Snyder this weekend tweeted out that Zack Snyder's Justice League Justice is Gray is coming soon to HBO Max. This is the black and white version. Are we all going to reconvene to watch the black and white version of this movie? Because maybe that'll change everything.
Man, I doubt I'm going to watch the whole 4 hours, but I might like fast forward through it just to see how some scenes play out. I don't think it needs to be in black and white, if that's what you're asking, but I might watch like a scene or two just to see how it looks, but that's probably the most I would do.
It seems so odd because the whole reason for this is because for the last few years, Zack Snyder has been staring at this movie in black and white because he didn't have a color corrected version of his scenes. So like the colors are all out of whack. So he watches it on a monitor in black and white. So he's gotten so used to watching it in black and white, he kind of fell in love with it, watching it black and white. I don't know. This doesn't sound like the art, like honoring the artist's vision.
People love black and white stuff, Peter. So sure, go for it. Put it on HBO Max. Let people watch this as many times as they want.
Yeah. Okay. You can find more of all of our work /film.com. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and not angry emails, because we will just delete those to peter@/film.com. And please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.